The Positive Professor and Neil Oliver are coming up, but first, it's time for The Clash. And breaking tonight, dozens of people have been killed in rocket strikes by Russian forces in the city of Kharkiv in the northeast of Ukraine. The country's Interior Ministry advisor Anton Hryshchenko announced the shocking news in a Facebook post earlier, while residents took to Twitter to share horrific footage of the indiscriminate shelling unleashed by Vladimir Putin's army.
Русский мир, говоришь?
The massacre came after Putin's nuclear madness was thrown in the spotlight after he publicly ordered his deterrent forces to be put on high alert following days of setbacks for the Russian army, along with the claim that Liz Truss had provoked them with her sanction warnings. With Mad Vlad's mental state seemingly becoming more unhinged by the day, fears have been raised of a wider conflict in Europe. So in response, Germany decided to throw out their post-World War II approach to defence, and in an emergency sitting of Parliament, the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, announced the country would increase its military spending by more than 2% of its GDP, while also announcing an £85 billion fund. The move will finally mean Germany meets NATO's defence expenditure, which is something Donald Trump had criticised European nations for during his presidency. Currently, only 10 of the 30 members of NATO meet the 2% requirement. And despite the fact the UK is the second highest spender in NATO after the United States, do we need to get real and follow Germany by dramatically boosting our armed forces budget in light of Putin's invasion of Ukraine? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. You can vote in our poll there too. But to help me make your mind up now, I'm joined by the Conservative MP and former Defence Secretary, Dr. Liam Fox, and the broadcaster and author, Nina Mishkov. Dr. Fox, this has changed everything, hasn't it? We have to increase our military spending now.
Well, we're one of the few countries that actually spends above the NATO thresholds. We're spending 2.3% of our GDP on defence, and given the size of our GDP, that makes us the second biggest spender in NATO after the United States. It's good that Germany is catching up, but even when Germany does catch up, after many years of being behind, it still will be behind the UK in terms of share of GDP. So it's great to see Germany doing that, and I think it's great that Chancellor Scholz is doing that. I wish it had happened a long time before. NATO would be in a better place. But when we've got some other NATO members at less than 1% of GDP, it shows you the rise in NATO spending that will be needed just to keep its members on track with the rest. And the problem with NATO is that for many of its members, they all want to have the insurance policy, but many of them have not wanted to pay the premiums.
No, and I completely understand, and I think it's wrong, and I agree with Trump. They should be spending the 2% of GDP figure. But for us, Dr. Fox, let's just forget our NATO allies for one moment and look at our situation. We have stripped back the armed forces over years and years and years because we hoped there would never be another European war. Now there is, so I think we're going to have to pummel money into it.
Well, it's always nice to spend more, and Russia knows, as many of our enemies do, that we're much more concerned about ploughing money into our welfare-addicted political system than national security. But let's remember what Britain does. Britain carries a very heavy financial burden in terms of nuclear deterrent. We have increased our naval capability with our 2 carriers and our purchase of F-35s. We can't do everything, and I think there's a very strong argument that within NATO, we have to work out what it is that each country brings to it, rather than every country trying to do everything, but not so efficiently. And I think that we need to recognise where Britain's strengths lie. And as a maritime nation, we need to ensure that we have a strong navy and strong naval capability, not least because 90% of our trade comes by sea. That is what we need to be able to have. I think there's a strong argument for some of the European continental states improving the size of their army, where they're less dependent on maritime power than we are.
How ready are we for a nuclear threat from Russia?
We have a nuclear deterrent, but I think that we've got to stop this playing into Putin's hands. Putin's talking about the nuclear question because that suits him in terms of propaganda. And every time we start to concentrate on this, we're playing into the Putin propaganda argument. We have an adequate nuclear deterrent in the United Kingdom, in France, and the United States. He wants us to talk about nuclear issues, not about the potential slaughter in Ukraine. And we mustn't play his game by going down that route.
Nina Mishkov, you don't think we should be spending any more on defence, even in light of this shocking development in Ukraine?
It is shocking and horrifying, and we're all absolutely outraged by it and upset by it. But to increase our defence budget will be a complete knee-jerk reaction. Where are we going to get the money from, for a start? As Dr. Fox has already said, the NHS welfare system, that's eaten up a lot. And of course, since the pandemic began, the Conservative Party and the government have wasted an awful lot of money. Look at, was it 37 billion? Was it 39 billion on a test and trace system that was not fit for purpose when it started? And the thing is, would you want to spend a lot of money with this government in charge?
Yes.
Look at the Ajax tanks. We ordered 580 of them. There's something like 3.5 billion we've paid. We've had 14 delivered.
Would you rather have Jeremy Corbyn in charge right now?
I don't. I'm certainly not. I would never go near Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that was the alternative. That was the alternative.
It is not the alternative.
And that's who Keir Starmer
It is not the alternative.
No, but it was the alternative at the last election.
Keir Starmer is not Jeremy Corbyn. He's spent the last 2 years trying to tell people he is not.
But he wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister
I did not.
now.
No, I don't want Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm saying Keir Starmer
I've never voted for Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm not saying
I would
you
not.
did. I'm saying that's what Keir Starmer wanted.
No, he did. Keir Starmer did
yes,
not.
He did.
Want.
He was in his shadow cabinet and he told all of us to vote for him at the last election.
Keir Starmer was trying to become leader, and you can't become a leader from being outside the tent. You've got to be inside the tent, and that's what you can't blame him for that. The only way you can climb the greasy pole is to get on the greasy pole and elbow the other people out.
I completely disagree with that. I mean, Keir Starmer, Liam Fox, if he had his way, we would have Jeremy Corbyn in charge at the moment, the ultimate Putin apologist and appeaser.
Not just an apologist, but someone who would have dismantled our nuclear deterrent and actually made us much more vulnerable. But of course, the argument here is about first principles. The first duty of government is national security, not welfare, not the NHS. As Dennis Healey once said, if you don't have national security, spending on everything else can become worthless. Those were in the days when we had Labour politicians who actually had some principles. We need to understand that in a dangerous world, we've not only got to protect our own people, but play our part in a wider global security arrangement. We are the ones who hold the torch for freedom. NATO is not just a defensive alliance. NATO was built, if you look at the NATO terms of reference, it was about our adherence to human rights. It was about defending our liberty. It was about ensuring the international rule of law. That's what it's all about. Those who actually say we shouldn't be spending money on defence, we should be spending it on X, Y, and Z, as I've just heard, on the NHS. Of course, I'm a doctor. I'd love to spend more money on the NHS, but I value my liberty. I value our human rights. I value our security more than anything else. And anyone else who tries to lead you down the garden path and believe that anything else is a worthwhile first principle for government doesn't deserve to be in government.
Nina, Fox, this is our survival at stake, Liam Fox says.
Sorry, I was going to ask Dr. Fox a question. Dr. Fox, are you not embarrassed by the leadership of your own government and your own party? I want to ask you because Boris Johnson said in the...
You don't think Boris Johnson has performed effectively?
Boris Johnson said in the House in November, we just have to recognise that there is not going to be a war on land in the European Union.
You've asked him a question. Let Dr. Fox answer the question.
So please, Dr. Fox, answer that question.
I want to talk first principles. I want to talk about defence being the first duty of government. You want to talk about political trivia and party political points.
It's not political trivia.
You would think that there wasn't a Russian invasion going on of a democratic Western state. This is no time to get involved in the trivia of party politics, or whether you like our current government or whether you like Boris Johnson. This is a struggle of a country trying to keep that torch of freedom alive at a time when a big, aggressive despot and dictator-driven power wants to snuff it out. I would have thought that at this point, we all at least want to stick to the principles of our politics.
Absolutely.
And not engage in the weeds of our
stick to the
politics.
principles. But then how can we do that when we have a government that is just that is not respected around the world? When we have
Nina, that's not true. That's not true. You ask anyone in Ukraine at the moment, including the President Vladimir Zelensky, and he will tell you that he is proud of the UK
Absolutely.
response.
But
he is proud of how Boris Johnson has reacted. So this mythology that somehow the UK is not respected around the world is a disgusting line being put out by lefties to do us down, and it is not backed up by
I
fact.
am not trying to do him down. I'm just saying that Boris Johnson, because of all the shenanigans that have gone on, is not seen as a serious leader, however much...
Go and ask Volodymyr Zelensky that, because that's not what he says. That's not what he's told the world.
However much he is the karaoke Churchill, that he does not command respect. You know, they asked Putin's spokesperson, what about a sense of responsibility for Putin? And she said, well, you might look to your own government and your own prime minister. I mean, that you're starting not on a level page.
Back Putin's spokesperson over Vladimir Zelensky. Final word to you, Liam Fox, because I look at what Zelensky said, I look at what the Ukrainian government have said, and they have said that the UK has been a shining light over the past month, because without us, without our stand, we probably wouldn't have the very strong action from the US and the EU.
The United Kingdom, I think, has been consistent and it's been honourable in the whole of the dealings over this particular issue. We wanted to try to give diplomacy a chance, but we were always willing to stand up for the strength. We recognise that the economic strength of the West is as vital today as it was in the Cold War. We are a key part of that as the world's fifth biggest economy, as the second biggest military power in NATO. And I'm afraid that there are still those in the Westminster bubble who prefer cartoon politics to the serious issues and the threats that we face in the world today.
Very true. That was Conservative MP, former Defence Secretary Dr. Liam Fox, and the broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov. Thank you both. So who do you agree with? Well, Stephen on Twitter says, the UK spend enough on defence as it is. Unlike other countries, our armed forces are up to date, modern and well trained. Simon says the defence of this country should always be the highest priority. And from Mark, it never should have been reduced to anywhere near the current levels.